Hey everyone, real quick before we get into the video, a spoiler warning because I will be showing gameplay of a level 90 dungeon. It won't be the main scenario quest dungeon, but I thought I'd just let you know. In case you don't want to see anything, you can always minimize the video if you just want to hear my thoughts. Now, this won't be a guide to Gunbreaker by any means. That will follow later because some people have asked if I was going to be doing job guides again, and I will. But this is just going to be my impressions of Gunbreaker at 90 after having played around with it for a couple of days. So, Gunbreaker. It pretty much hit all of the expectations that I had from looking at the media tour and the other information that we've had prior to Endwalker. Still very much so feels like the Gunbreaker that I know and love from Shadowbringers, with some slight additions to spice up the gameplay a little bit. We've gotten a bit better when it comes down to our defensive capabilities. Second Aurora charge doesn't really do much when we're talking about a boss scenario where you have full uptime, because sure, you'll have a second use right at the start, but from that point onwards, you're just going to be using it on cooldown as you would before. But every time there is some downtime and you start accumulating that second charge again, that does feel quite nice, as your cooldown isn't just being wasted. It's also really nice in dungeons because you have a lot of downtime in those while you're grouping together mobs, so you can have Aurora up for pretty much every mob pack. Our second upgrade is Heart of Corundum, which Heart of Stone upgrades into. Has a lot of text, but simply speaking it just grants you a big damage reduction at the start, and then that damage reduction drops off halfway through its duration, and then you're also given a mini Excog, a heal that will trigger when you drop below a certain percentage of HP or when the buff runs out, and this is quite a strong upgrade. The extra mitigation can help out a lot when you're out of cooldowns, and the heal is always nice as well, either to heal up after you get hit by a tank buster or when you drop low as you're getting beat on by dungeon mobs. Moving on to our offensive tools. Now the third cartridge I'm gonna leave for later because there's some more stuff that I want to talk about surrounding it, with how it affects our rotation and such, so we'll skip ahead to the other two. Hypervelocity felt a bit weird to get used to initially, but that's probably because it's new and I had to get used to it. And now that I am fairly used to it, it just adds to the aspect of Gunbreaker that I enjoy so much, the heavy off-global cooldown nature of the job. Now, I do understand that yet another off-global cooldown could be a bit annoying for some people. It's already very heavy on the weaving aspect, and it can be quite annoying to move bosses around or to use your defensive mitigation when you're also supposed to be using your offensive off-global cooldowns at the same time. Now, for me personally, I feel like it won't really hinder that aspect too much. While we do use Burst Strike a fair amount, because we now also have a 2 cartridge spender instead of Double Down, it hasn't really made it any harder to weave the tank stuff compared to before, so I quite enjoy the addition. And then of course, I mentioned it before, we also have Double Down. Now this impacts our rotation quite a bit. It eats 2 cartridges, so we now need to make sure that we have 3 when we go into our No Mercy, and it does make it so that our time in between bursts feels a little bit more empty than it was before, because we need to generate that extra cartridge. But on the other hand, Bloodfest now also grants us 3 cartridges, so when we use Bloodfest outside of our No Mercy, it will feel plenty active because we can just use Burst Strike and Hypervelocity quite a bit over there. And then if you ever go into your No Mercy with full cartridges and Bloodfest ready, then you're just going to be pressing a lot of buttons, which feels great. Double Down in itself is also just an amazing skill. It's a big hit for during your No Mercy, but it's also AoE, so you can make plenty of use of it in dungeons, which is the one part that I felt Gunbreaker was maybe a little bit lacking in, so it's a very nice addition for that. Now, the fact that it uses 2 cartridges does impact our rotation quite a bit, or at least I think it does. Now, what's going to follow is me just speculating from my limited time at level 90 with the job, and it could be that I'm completely wrong and that maybe a different approach to the opener and the rotation or some skill speed changes end up fixing this. But from what I've played so far, it looks like this makes it so that we don't have a looping rotation anymore, or at least not the old 3 minutes that we used to have. I've hit a dummy for 10 minutes on end and I never really got to a point where I felt like I was looping. Now, I don't really mind that. It can be really fun to just improvise on the fly and try to make the right decisions depending on what you have available. But it does make it so that I currently don't know that if what I'm doing is right. So at some point I come to the following quote-unquote problem, I guess I'll call it. I have 3 cartridges ready for my No Mercy, then the next GCD I can go into my burst, but that next GCD is going to be Solid Barrel, aka the one that grants you a cartridge. So there's 3 options. 1, overcap on cartridges, which I feel like would always be the wrong one. 2. Start Gnashing Fang early and miss the first GCD under No Mercy. You can still get continuation under No Mercy though, so it's just the GCD that you're missing. Or 3. Go into No Mercy with only 2 cartridges and then use Double Down late into the burst window. Or I guess we can just delay No Mercy by a GCD, but I feel like that would usually be the wrong choice as well. Now, I haven't been able to do any testing in a raid setting, so I'm not quite sure how everything will line up with raid buffs, but I feel like as long as the Double Down still fits into the buff window, then there's no real problem with using it later into your burst. But I could be doing something wrong, and maybe a different opener or some skill speed changes could take care of this issue, because we also don't really loop anymore. It only comes up every now and then, but it is something that I'm going to be on the lookout for. But anyways, those are kind of my first impressions on Gunbreaker. It feels pretty good to play. The new additions were welcome changes, but I am going to be on the lookout to see if people come up with some sort of a fix to the problem that I ran into. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me for today, so I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.